world can be a dark, lonely place. It's easy to lose your way. The light from your dreams becomes harder to chase. The words won't come, you don't know what to say. When we come together, the storms we can weather. Don't let go of me, we'll get through this, you'll see. Like pictures from the past, we were meant to last. There's nothing we can't do when we come together. United we stand, divided we fall. This is the battle cry that unites us all. Come with me, let's show what we can do. We can't do it without you.
Hey everybody, welcome welcome to Conversations with Christy. I am so glad you're here today. I was totally singing along. I don't normally sing along with my intro, it's like the ringtone on my phone, and so I hear it all the time, but I was just singing along over here. I got my like Mick Mars hair going on today. I feel like I was telling Karena backstage, I'm like, I can't figure out if I'm like Stevie Nicks or Mick or not, no, Nikki Sixx or Mick Mars. But I've kind of come to the thing. I feel a little bit more like Mick Mars today. Victor, I am so glad you're here. Karena, Victor has been doing his meditations for a year. He has got over
A
1,500 steps.
year.
Did a huge celebration
That's
thing this
amazing.
morning. I was on a call, so I didn't get to be a part of it. But everybody, please congratulate Victor on his bringing his
Congratulations.
beauty and his energy and everything to that. And I just want to honor the hard work that you have put in, because you guys, it is not easy to do this, to get up every day and prepare yourself to be on camera and to go through, even if it is like Victor's meditations are pretty much the same every day. It's he's put a lot of intent to it. There's still, it takes a lot. Like, you still have to get up and prepare and show up. And so I just want to honor all of your hard work. And guys, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm trying not to play with my hair. It is sticking to my eyelashes that I glued on. My bangs have grown out just enough that they're like right there. And so just ignore me as I do this today.
Your hair looks great as always, Christy.
I had it in huge Velcro rollers earlier. I was walking around. So I think, let's see, Ben, I seen you. Teresa, hello. Kim, hello. I'm so glad you guys are all here. Hello to everybody that's lurking out there. Um, congrats on avoiding apprehension. And my cosmetics are super expensive. So are mine. Let's talk about the cost of prestige makeup. That's a whole thing. I love it. I love it. Karena, who is sleeping behind you?
Merlin. And Magic is sitting right on the other side of my computer monitor looking at me.
Oh,
And
awesome.
Moonkin is on the floor in a box. She has a bed, but she never wants the bed. She only wants the cardboard box. So I keep a
You
box
know,
set out for her.
mine love bags. They just want to crawl in all of the bags, grocery bags, trash bags. It doesn't matter. Um, Mine are all like away for right now, which is nice because they showed up yesterday, you know,
Yeah, they were
causing
showing up for you.
although Clark was so cute. He is so cuddly. He just like showed up. I know, isn't Merlin like the best name for a cat? I love that name.
He is a wizard too. My nickname for him is the Little Wizard because he
Oh,
knows how to open all of the drawers in the house and he can open
oh,
internal doors, that have the pull handle.
oh,
He
right,
stands on his
right.
paws and pulls down and
Oh
opens
my
them.
goodness.
He's just very yeah, he's and then he yeah, his extrasensory perception very strong too, kind of eerily so. Yeah,
Oh,
all of the cats in my house, they have different personalities, different gifts, but I feel incredibly honored that they
right.
are in my to share space with them. They're
Right,
also
right.
special.
Oh, I love that. Victor said, mine like to judge me. I think Shitty Kitty likes to plot my death sometimes because I think Michael and I were talking about this the other day. She went from having this big, beautiful witchy room and like just this space that was like so cozy to now it's like there's these other little three
Cramped,
cats.
sharing with
They-
kit yeah.
Right? And they're all playful and like literally you guys Shitty just looked at the cats the other day, like all the others, like the littles and Edgar, and was just like, and they just went. I was like, well, I guess Shitty told you. And then my dogs are just, they don't know. they're just,
Yeah.
they're just
Dogs are
whatever.
wonderful, but they're just
Yes,
usually not as psychically tuned in.
right,
So they're
right.
sort of operating on a different frequency.
I was, so I'll share this and then we'll get into the
Oh,
topic for
no.
today. But yesterday, so I finished my shadow work coaching certificate the other day. So I got that done, and now I'm going on to the Carl Jung psychology part of that. And so I was studying archetypes, and you guys know I love me some archetypes. But we were talking about the archetype of the innocent and like
Mm.
the Forrest Gump, Snow White, Red Riding Hood of the world. And I was just like, I think those are my dogs. Like, they fit that archetype of just like
Yes.
we're here and we trust everybody and everything is good and it's all amazing. And I think that's the archetype of my dogs. I have yet to figure out my cat. I don't know. Maybe we should create another archetype that's just called Shitty Kitty and like make it our own.
Well, and interestingly, maybe this sort of segues us into our discussion on the last of the outer planets just changed signs. So in a lot of ways, we're entering a new era. But you know, the the cat energy, um, it's very ancient. There are cat gods from ancient Egypt, like Bastet, and there's another one, his name I am forgetting. But, even just looking back over, centuries or even thousands of years, we can see different eras and eons of time. And I feel like at different times, that age of the innocence, the dog energy, I'm showing up, I'm
Yeah.
here, everything is amazing.
Right.
Sometimes that is stronger. Sometimes it's more of a cat, like, I'm going to take it all in. I'm going to gauge all the vibes. I'm going to
Right.
internally judge what I see here. But
Right.
yeah,
Right. Right.
we do live through eras with a lot of those archetypes. And I think one of the things that has been so challenging, probably for everyone in various ways over the last, gosh, it hasn't even been a year. Um, I don't know, 8 months since the
Mhm.
outer planets all started changing signs, all of the era stuff is shifting at once. And
Yeah.
Christy, you and I talked about this at the end of December when we looked to the year ahead. And, we kind of said there's no time to really adapt because an outer planet changes signs. And as soon as you're kind of like, okay, I get this vibe, another outer planet changes signs. And you're like, whoa, the rug has been pulled out again. And so, in the same way that even looking at the energy between a cat and a dog, both beautiful energies but
Right.
not
Right.
the
Right.
same. And
Oh,
you
right.
you can't talk to them the same way, you can't interact with them the same way. This has been very much the story of the last part of 2024 into 2025 has just been, yeah, maybe I have the tools to interact with this energy, but I haven't used them in a while and I have to change the way I'm interacting, and what I was doing
Right.
yesterday doesn't work anymore, so I have to put that tool back in long-term storage, get out a different tool. And
Right.
so there's just been a lot of yeah, kind of trying to adapt even in areas where we can work with that energy and we have worked with that energy, we haven't worked with that energy in a long time. So it really feels like we're digging down to the bottom of our toolboxes. Like, yeah, I feel like I've probably done this before. Oh, did I throw that tool out because I didn't think I was going to need it anymore? Where is that
Right.
tool? And so it feels
Right.
like it's been hard to really make progress and move forward because we're essentially like on a construction site and we're spending most of our time just digging through our toolbox, looking for the right hammer, the right screw, the right screwdriver. And so it's hard to feel like we're moving forward.
Right. Yesterday I was like, I feel like somebody gave me a map and they're like, all we know is there's like stinky mud and a pond and a forest and good luck. Like, that's all we can tell you. And then it's saying that he has decided that Mercury no longer exists. And
Oh, if it could only be that simple, then,
right.
if only they cared if we believed they existed or not. And, one thing actually sort of to that point, that I find really interesting looking at these outer planet transits, we
Hmm.
so, starting November of 2024, Pluto moved into Aquarius, and then, in March, April, Neptune and, Saturn moved from Pisces to Aries, and then a few days ago, Sunday night, Uranus moved from Taurus to Gemini. This is all the outer planets. So these are planets that in ancient times they did not know existed because Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto cannot be seen with the naked eye. So astrologers who were analyzing, kings and countries and, all of that, the court astrologers in Mesopotamia or the Hellenistic era, um, didn't weren't even considering these planets.
Right. Right.
Telescopes had not been invented yet, and Pluto was discovered, I think, 1933, less than 100 years ago. And
Yeah.
so, um, there really is this feeling among a lot of astrologers. This resonates with me a lot personally. Is that we discover planets as we have kind of the collective consciousness to
Yeah.
process their energies and do something with them. And that doesn't mean they weren't in effect before that, but our
Right.
ability to sort of process everything they were doing, the collective consciousness probably wasn't there yet. And
Mhm.
so, as we're looking at now, um, you know, I cannot believe we are already a quarter of the way through this century.
I know.
Unbelievable.
I know.
2025. But there is this energy of more people than ever are in therapy, are doing deep self-reflection. Nobody had heard of the term shadow work 50 years ago. Nobody was doing that. Um,
Right.
and
Right.
there really is this sense that we are ready to process all of the
Mm.
energies of these outer planets. The flip side to that is these are a lot more complex, a lot deeper, a lot more time consuming. Mercury, to Ben's point, it zips around the zodiac. It goes retrograde
Right.
3 times a year. It's just run, 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 run.
Right.
When
Right.
it's not retrograde, it zips through a zodiac sign in less than a month. And
Right.
Venus, Mars, still about a sign a month. Then you get to Jupiter, which is one sign every year. And then you move beyond that and you're into all of these outer planets that we're seeing changing signs. So it's like these are the big ones, the ones that take more than a year to work with. And not only are we dealing with the energies of all of these outer planets now in a way we were not 200 years ago because we didn't even know they existed, all of them are changing signs at once.
Right.
In this
Right.
2025 timeframe. So there really is this sense of we've done so much deep collective consciousness work,
Mhm.
and we've started to process the energies of these outer planets. But now all of their energies are sort of colossally shifting at once. So it almost feels like, you get to know somebody really well at work and you
Mhm.
work with them a lot, spend lots of hours with them, great. And you do that for like a couple of years. And then you go out to a bar with them. You may see a completely different side of them and be like, did I know this person? But
Right.
we've kind of gotten used to all of these planets in very specific contexts, and
Mhm.
all of those have shifted. And not only have they all shifted in less than a year, but they've all shifted in the same direction towards more young, outward facing, um, aggressive, um, make your mark on the world kind of
Mhm.
energies. All of them are moving in that direction. None of them are moving back towards the passive, yin, receptive,
Yeah.
intuitive to kind of balance things out. They're all marching forward lockstep together.
Yeah.
So there, there just really is this. We are standing on the cusp of a big shift for
Mhm.
everybody. And for anyone who has been feeling over the past year that just the ground keeps shifting underneath you, and just when you feel like you've got it, you don't have it. You're slipping, you're falling, different emotions are coming up, different experiences are coming up, and you feel like you're almost dealing with crisis after crisis, and you can't really marshal things into a cohesive plan. That is kind of the energy we've got going on here.
Yeah.
And so I think, I just want to give a little bit of space. Anybody who is feeling that way, this is where we're at.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
just collectively where we're
And
at.
it's so like, I mean, almost in our lifetimes, we haven't had this kind of a big
We have
shift,
not.
and so we really are going forward in this way where we're like, okay, well, we kind of know what this looks like. Um, and, I think it's more now than ever, journaling is so important because, like yesterday, I was explaining how these energies felt in my body. Like I'm stuck and it's
Mhm.
just kind of piled on. And, and I think that's really important because there will be a point where you are looking back and you're like, okay, I'm kind of comfortable in it now. Um,
Mhm.
but there was a point where this was brand new and terrifying. And I love that. Did you see Ben? He said shift happens.
Clever,
I love
Ben.
that.
Yes, clever.
And yes, Steve, Karina has a channel. It's called Magic of the Moon Astrology. Um,
I will say
and
though,
his
especially
channel,
lately, I've been doing most of my, like, this particular outer planet stuff I wanted to talk about. I thought about just doing it on my channel, and I was like, I think I would rather do it as a conversation with Christy. So I feel like more and more, a lot of my video content is shifting in this direction. But I do have some articles I'm working on for my Substack.
right? And her Substack is free. It comes out every Sunday.
Did we lose you, Christy?
I open it up and
Oh,
I'm
there
like,
you
okay. I was gonna say her
go.
Substack is free, and I literally
You're
plan my
back.
weeks around it. It opens. I open the email and I look at everything, and I'm like, okay, so this day I should probably lay low, or this is a great day to write down all of my ideas and do that. And I think somebody else asked, Teresa did. Um, she says, Karina, doesn't it make you wonder how many other planets we can't see yet? Talking
Yeah.
about, the collective consciousness.
Astrologers for sure, Teresa, have basically speculated on this, that there will be more that we discover as our consciousness is ready for it. And even things like, we didn't discover Neptune, for example, specifically because we had telescopes. We discovered it because Uranus was a little odd occasionally in its orbit. And it turned out to be, when Uranus went by Neptune, Neptune is massive and its gravity pulled Uranus a little bit out of its orbit. And so that was how
Oh,
Neptune was discovered. They were like, there must be something massive somewhere there that's pulling
right.
on Uranus. So yeah, you never know. Like, yes, we have telescopes, but space and the cosmos is vast. Oh, we lost Christy. I'm sure she'll be back. So yeah, it is. We definitely could discover more planets as our consciousness raises. And I think one thing that is important to think about with these outer planet shifts too, I've seen so many astrologers focusing just on the fact that all of the outer planets are changing sign within this year, which is true, but they all have very different scopes. So Pluto shifted and is going to be in its new sign for 20 years. Neptune shifted. It's going to be in its sign for 14 years. Uranus just shifted a few days ago. It's going to be in its new sign for 6 to 7 years. Saturn is already going to be out of Aries in 2.5 years. So they're, Christy, you're back. Yay. So
Back.
even though all of these shifts start at the same time, these are not all equal duration energies. Saturn in Aries is a 2.5 year arc, kind of long, but when you compare it to Pluto's 20-year arc, not long at all. Saturn is going to go through so many signs over this Pluto and Aquarius 20-year arc. So it's interesting. It's almost like we have the same start line for all of these outer planets as they enter their new signs, but the finish lines are very different. Pluto in Aquarius is more like a marathon. You start running and you've got 4 hours. Whereas Saturn in Aries is more like a 5K. You start running and about half an hour later, you're done. It's important to keep in mind, because as we look at the events that happened, globally or nationally or in each of our individual lives, try to correlate them with a particular planet entering a sign, because that tells you, is this a couple year arc for you, or is this like a 20-year arc for you? Huge difference. And Pluto moving into Aquarius really bookends all of the others, because it went into its new sign first for the last time it entered Aquarius in November of 2024. And it is going to be there long after all of these other outer planets that have changed signs move into their next new sign. So Pluto in Aquarius really is the bookend, the backdrop. Pluto's called the generational planet because it really does kind of mark generations of people. And I could detail this a lot if we wanted to go full deep on Pluto. But Pluto in Aquarius, what seems most correlated with that is the rise of AI, honestly. If we look at, what happened in the world, the big release of ChatGPT in a web browser format that people could easily ask questions of, that happened within a couple of days of Pluto's entrance into Aquarius for the first time. So, what I have heard many astrologers say is like, yes, next 20 years, age of AI. Maybe, but I think if we look at Pluto going through other signs, and of course, it doesn't feel like you even have to be very prophetic, much of a prophet to predict well, AI is certainly going somewhere because it's becoming more and more ubiquitous. But I feel like I just have kind of a different take on that, because if we look at Pluto through the other signs, Pluto is a planet of transformation, deep looking within oneself individually and collectively, turning over that rock where you don't really want to know what's underneath. You sense it's pretty gnarly, but you kind of just go there at some point and you deal with whatever stuff, whatever nastiness you find underneath. If you look at like Pluto in Scorpio, very correlated with the AIDS epidemic in the 80s. Scorpio is so much about our sexuality and, the deep connection we have with others. People actually feared sex during that time. There were all these messages about safe sex, and because people were afraid of AIDS.
Right.
And, we look at Pluto in Sagittarius. Sagittarius is like this worldview builder, can be very deeply religious, even to the point of fanaticism. You get
Hmm.
things like the bombing of the World Trade Centers and a lot of pretty nasty things that are done in the name of ideology or the religion
Yeah.
or worldview. Um,
Right.
s- and then you look at Pluto and Capricorn, where the banks kind of crashed. All of the subprime mortgage lending fell apart. It turned out we were being far too speculative. People lost
Hmm.
trust in a lot of financial institutions. A lot of people lost their life savings and
Oh,
retirement.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so, certainly, if we look at Pluto, even just those last couple of transits through Scorpio, Sagittarius, and Capricorn, um, yeah, you could say Pluto and Capricorn was all about financial institutions, but it wasn't a time when people loved financial institutions. It was a time of
Right.
like turning over every rock and being like, oh, this is nasty underneath,
Yeah.
and all of my retirement savings might be gone. And
Right.
so, but but you know, I feel like people are viewing Pluto and Aquarius as like, yeah, we're going to build robots and artificial intelligence, and it's going to be amazing. And
Right.
history would sort of dictate otherwise, my friends. That it, does Pluto and Aquarius absolutely correlate with the rise of AI and increases in robotics technology? It does.
Yeah.
But this initial uber optimism, I feel like we're already starting to see some cracks in that. There are huge copyright issues where artists, all of their stuff goes into the AI. They're not being
Right.
fairly compensated, which does that lead artists to then stop producing? And then
Hmm.
nothing new goes into the AI models because we have
Right.
essentially, we're killing creativity.
Right.
There's
Right.
um, and power consumption is a huge thing. All of the big tech companies are looking to create nuclear power plants across the
Hmm.
US to fuel the compute needed to run all of these massive
Right.
models and all of these people asking questions. Um, that could go multiple ways. There have been nuclear power can be amazing. There have also been some notable historical examples where it was not particularly amazing. Um,
Right. Right.
but I feel privacy is now becoming a big focus. That oh, I put all of these things into ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or any of the others, and oh,
Right.
they feed all of that into their training data. They may be keeping records of
Wow.
that. Oh, that's not very cool. Um,
Right.
and I've just in the last couple of months started to see articles about people who are developing deep relationships with AI, to the point where
Yeah.
it's breaking up marriages, and because they feel like the AI validates them,
Understand.
understands them in a way that
Yeah.
in a relationship with ChatGPT, there's no messiness involved. You don't have to
Right.
accommodate another person and their feelings or thoughts or bad moods. So, I feel like Pluto and Aquarius, yes, it correlates with AI, but it more deeply correlates with our humanity.
Yeah.
All of the air signs, you and I've talked about this so much, Christy, they're about being
Right.
human.
Right.
And
Right.
I feel like this next 20 years, AI is almost, it's not the end effect. It's sort of the vehicle
Right.
through which we explore our own humanity and turn over some rocks and may not like what we find there.
Well,
What
and
does it mean to be human if
right.
it's actually easier to have a significant other who is an AI? What does that mean?
Right.
What does it mean for each one of us if we are willing to use the AI tools and artists are not compensated, and then
Mhm.
artists start dying out? Nobody is creative anymore.
E
These are big questions we have yet to grapple with over this next 20 years.
Well, and I think you bring up a good point, all of those other things, especially banking. I mean, if you guys know me,
economics. It's my thing. I love it.
Ooh,
But we were lied to. Really, like that's where all of those predatory lending practices came from. I remember when I owned my home that people were like, "Oh, get these ARM loans, refinance 3 to 5 years. It's good." And so it's not like there was a lot of honesty around
yeah.
that came out later. And specifically with I've seen so much stuff where Michael and I look at each other and we're like, is this real? Is this fake? Like, we don't really know what it is. You have to
Yeah.
Google it, find out. And I've seen a lot of things where it's like, have an AI friend or this or that. And I think the one thing, especially being an Aquarius, is that
Mm,
there's such an ability with Aquarius energy to disassociate
yeah.
and to emotionally shut down. I mean, I've been dealing with this over the last few days. It is like a switch for me. It just flips and I am completely disassociated. And there's no feeling. It's like, okay, well, this is it. And so I think that there's a beauty there to it because I do think it can be helpful, but I've seen it where, help AI let AI write your next book. As somebody who loves to write, like, I don't want to read a book that was written by AI. I want somebody's thoughts and humanity. And Ben and I worked on a song together, and I don't even think I've shared it with anybody yet. It's a very cool song that I wrote. It was like uh, just about a boy being in this town and like not fitting in and not having
Mm,
any focus and not having anybody really believe in them. And as we were going through, we were putting it through whatever AI program Ben uses. I don't remember what he said it was, but we both agreed it was missing that soul, that passion. And I was like, you need to just put in there, like, he needs to fucking scream. Like, there needs to be this
yeah.
soul because that's what was missing. And it's very easy for Aquarius to slip into that energy of, well, this is just how this is now. And to not, and I think we have to be very careful, even as an Aquarius myself, I have to be really careful not to just shut down and go very clinical and have this very, because it is almost, um, well, I mean, with AI, it is inhuman. And so, but when you're being encouraged with all of that, and then we got to remember, Aquarius is represented by the suit of swords, and that
Mhm.
is sharp. Like, there's no way that you don't get hurt in that sword. Like, in that suit, if you pull a sword on somebody, that's a
Mhm.
whole thing. If you use it on someone, that's another whole thing. So I think it's one of those very interesting things. And I think it's interesting too. You guys don't know this, but Karina and I were in a Facebook group together. We were admins in this Facebook group, and Karina sent out a thing and she's like, I'm out. Like, I'm off of Facebook. I'm out of this. I don't want my stuff being used to teach AI. And at the time, I was like, okay, well, cool. I get it. That's awesome. But I didn't understand the way that Karina understood what that looked like. And now that we're in it, I'm like, oh, I get it. Now, I don't have anything against ChatGPT
For
or anything
sure.
like that. Like, and that's not what we're saying here. We're just
Mm-mm.
saying be cautious with it, because I think, just like we've seen at the oh, hey, lending practices, home loans for everybody, no down payment, 80/20 loan, and all of this stuff. Like, it sounds great. Oh, you don't have to put any money down. We'll just do 80% on this loan and 20% on this loan. You have no down payment. You've got two mortgages. Yeah, you got two mortgages. And that sounds great. But then you get a few years down the road, and that's not so much fun. And,
Yeah.
I think that right now we should be observing and really just sitting back and encouraging everyone else to be like, that didn't go so well for the banks and the financial institutions. The housing market bottomed out. People lost a lot of stuff. Like, maybe before we just rush head on into this and be that Knight of Swords energy where we're just gonna barrel in and take the hill and we don't care, really slow down. Because I'm telling you guys, just from a personal experience, like I shared yesterday, it's not fun. It's, as you wade deeper and deeper into Pluto and Aquarius, it gets more and more icky and tricky and sticky. And it's not that it's bad. It's
Mhm.
just like you said, lifting up that rock. And for me, underneath it is like clowns and snakes, right? And you're like, no, but now you can't put the rock back down because you already know it's there. So you've got to do something with it. So yeah,
And
I
I love
think
what
just
you said, everything you were saying, Christy, about, it's not like any of this is bad. And it's not like
right,
ChatGPT is bad or AI is bad. It's
right,
the I wouldn't want the takeaway from here to be, oh, okay, yeah, I'm just going to go cancel all of my AI subscriptions. And
right,
this is much
right,
bigger than any one of us individually. Although, of course, if you want to cancel your AI subscriptions, each person gets their own unique free will. But
right,
it's
right.
important to remember, like when Pluto was in Scorpio, yeah, everything starts out a little bit euphoric. Like
Yeah,
when you go from a world where sex is very, regulated, only happens within certain confines, and now it's like, oh, it's just open, any consenting people
right,
can, that feels euphoric.
right,
And
right,
then
right,
you see that, like, the AIDS epidemic, and it's sort
right,
of, it always, and yeah, subprime mortgages for everybody can
right,
get a house loan. That sounds
right,
so
right,
great. But then
right,
over these long Pluto transits, we sort of see, oh, there's a cost. And
right,
that doesn't mean you're not going to get a home loan, but it might mean
right,
you're a little more cautious. You look at the terms
yeah,
more closely, and
right.
and Pluto is always somewhere. And wherever Pluto is, it really tends to feel kind of apocalyptic.
It
So there's
does.
never a
Yeah,
time where just Pluto is nowhere. Pluto is always somewhere. So just like the societal shift on what feels
mhm,
apocalyptic changes. And right now, yeah, with AI, things feel pretty
yeah,
apocalyptic. Um,
yeah,
but yeah, I do feel like AI is sort of we're still mostly in that phase with AI of like, I can just write all of this stuff instantly. It can summarize all my data. It
yeah,
can make me a song. It can create a picture of a tree. It
right,
can make a logo for my business. Which again, it's not that any of that is bad. It's just
right,
we're
right,
still
yeah,
in that euphoric phase, and there's still 19 and a half more years for this to play out. And we're going to
mhm,
get to the turning over the rocks phase where we do start. And I do feel like AI is just the vehicle, but the bigger Pluto in Aquarius, when we look back on it in decades, it will be about what is humanity and how do we
right,
feel about our humanity and what are we willing to sacrifice for our
yeah.
humanity.
And I
Um,
think that's important, too, to like, it really is. I'll tell you, I love that I can take all of the lyrics for the songs that I've written and send them to Ben and be like, I want it to sound like this. And
mhm.
it takes no time. When we
Right,
first did Should Have Known, it took us 6.5 months. And it was
right.
like little sections, little sections. It had to be done. We had to find a drummer. We had to find, we had to retune it. We had to master it. We had to mix it. We had to put all of those pieces together. Now, what was super freaking cool that I didn't even know you could do was you could play on your guitar. You could plug into a program you could play the chords on your guitar and set it to sound like a piano, and it would
Mm,
play the exact same chords as a piano, and it was beautiful. Like, it's amazing. So there's definitely benefits, and there's definitely, good
for
parts to it,
sure.
because being able to do is, I'm not patient. So waiting 6.5 months to hear the final version of my song drove me crazy, and it changed in between there. But I think I think it's good, and I think it's just really important that we maintain our humanity and we
Hmm.
maintain our human connection, and we continue to build those real life friendships, and those real life,
Hmm.
and not lose sight of that, and let AI be a benefit to that,
Hmm.
as
Yeah.
opposed to the, end all. It's just like, I love heels. I get to be
Hmm.
5'2", right? Yay.
Yep. Yep.
But I wouldn't want to wear them all the time, right? I wouldn't want to
Yeah.
wear those big high heels all the time. Like, I couldn't take the dogs out in those or go on a nice walk. Like, are you kidding? That would kill me. So
Yeah.
I think it's all about, realistic, but really, again, understanding the energies of it all, but not
Yeah.
saying anything like nothing is inherently good or inherently bad. It's how do you work with it? And what are we doing as a society? And like, if we're looking at job losses, that's, giving that stuff to robots, or, things like that. Like, the one thing I don't want to see is, like, the inmates take over the asylum, right?
Hmm.
Like, you don't want to see that kind of thing. Oh, Bob Ross. Yeah. Well, I mean, Bob Ross is amazing. Watch Bob Ross if you need. But let's see, the record companies afraid to mount people's voices. Oh yeah. Where people sound like other singers. I mean, it's like I said, it's so great on one hand. And what's funny, Michael came home and he was singing my song back to me
Hmm.
yesterday. And I was like, that sounds so different when
Hmm.
versus this. And I love them both.
Hmm.
Um, so, I think it's important, and Uranus too, as it's moving in to Gemini and doing these things. There's a lot of big stuff there. I know I felt it when it moved in.
Yes.
It was
Well,
kind of a
we're gonna get to that too. Yeah, I'm just trying to set the stage because Pluto
yeah.
changing signs bookends everything else and preceded everything else. So everything else that we're talking about with the outer planets is in the context of Pluto now being in Aquarius, and the core question being what makes us fundamentally human, and
Right.
how much our humanity are we willing to um, compromise for the sake of convenience.
Hmm.
And I feel
Yeah.
like that is sort of what we're living through right now. And again,
Right.
nothing is bad. Just like when Pluto went through Scorpio, is sex bad? Sex is not bad. Sex, you could argue, is one of
Right.
the most fundamental things. So it's
Right.
not that any of these Pluto topics are bad, but they can be very easily misused, and there's
Yeah.
no free lunch. I almost feel like that
Right.
could be Pluto's slogan. If something seems too good to be true, it probably is, and Pluto will
Yeah.
show you how and what you are giving up to get that free lunch. And that doesn't
Right.
mean you don't still want the free lunch. You may,
Right.
but Pluto's going
Right.
to say, "Well, if you get the free lunch, here's the contract. Here's the terms and conditions."
Right.
And when we
Right.
read through that, we may or may not want the free lunch. So I think it's important to realize that, we're sort of grappling with our core humanity as all of these other outer planets are also shifting. Ben, I feel
Starting
like
to call.
Mercury will strike you down. Um, and I think it was interesting. Truth Wave Energy, Victor said down below. I'm just looking for it. Perhaps human art will get rare and become very valuable. And I think that's very insightful. And I think we've sort of historically seen that as Pluto
Right.
moves through things, and we sort of see what the inexpensive, convenient, easy version of something looks like, we tend to
Hmm.
place higher value on, oh,
Right.
it's a lot of work to like make a song from start to finish with a full
Yeah.
orchestra and band and vocalist and, you know, writing the lyrics and writing the music. That's a lot of
Yeah.
work. And we start to appreciate that. You know,
Right.
or like,
Right.
oh yeah, I can make a picture of a frog really quickly on
Right.
OpenAI, but to actually for me to draw a frog is a lot of work. And yeah, I feel like we will start to value those things more
Um,
because we didn't realize all of the energy that went into them until we could
right.
get some version of them very quickly, sort of for free.
Uh,
And then it's going to be like,
right.
oh, wow, you rented a recording studio and had a five
Mhm.
piece band and a vocalist. And, you know, and we'll
Yeah.
be like, wow, I want to hear that track because almost nobody's doing that anymore.
Right.
You know, that's rare and
Right.
unique. And so, yeah, I think this is part of the Pluto transit. We
Mm.
see all of the amazing simplicity, convenience, all the things we can have. Then we start to see some of the cost to it. Then, regardless of where we land on that scale, we start to appreciate how much work the original thing was, how much
Right.
effort really
Right.
went into that.
Right. So what I'm hearing is that I need to go get my sleeve tattoo very quickly because that artistry might be leaving. Do you love
Well,
how I can just like twist anything around?
and I think that is such an interesting I hadn't specifically thought about tattoos, and I know you're saying that half jokingly, but,
Right.
I think one thing that's interesting is there are always going to be some forms of
Hmm.
humanity that there isn't a good, like, ChatGPT substitute for, and,
Right. Right.
I talked to one of my friends who has a lot of tattoos, and
Uh-huh.
he will even do the thing where when one of his favorite artists comes through town, he'll just get a flash tattoo from them. So he doesn't even know what it's gonna be. You know, it's
Oh,
just you
that's
show up
funny.
in line,
Yeah.
you get, whatever the artist is
Right.
doing that day.
Oh,
And
I love that.
I was like, "I kinda wanna know what they're putting on me beforehand because it's relatively permanent, right?"
Right. Right.
And my friend said, "What I want is I want my skin to be the canvas for that artist, and I
Yeah.
love that artist, I value that artist, and I want to mix my energy with theirs, and so whatever they
Right.
wanna put on the canvas of my
Yeah.
arm, I'm here for that because their energy is what I want. It doesn't matter what the picture looks like." And I
Right.
think,
Right.
tattoos may be an area where, um, I mean, certainly could you get to some point where AI develops the pattern and a robot does the needle? You could. But
Right.
I think
Right.
for most people who get tattoos, they
Mhm.
want the energy of that
Yeah.
particular artist, and they want
Hmm.
their body, their physical three-dimensional form to be taking on some of that energy. And so it may be that things like tattoos will, um, like that form of art isn't easily AIable. You know, I think some
Right.
of the
Right.
core, no one is trying to get the Mona Lisa on their back. They're trying to get tattoos that are meaningful to them. And
Yeah.
in, yeah, I'm not articulating this well, but I love that you brought up tattoos because I think
Right.
that may be one thing that actually is safe
Well, and there's a
from
bonding
this.
that happens when you get
Yeah,
like tattoos. I've got several. And you
yeah.
just go in there and I don't know, for me I kind of feel like a rebel. Like yeah, here's my arm. You know, my brother made so much fun of me when I got my forearm tattoo. He's like, "Oh, what? So now are you a badass biker chick? Like is that what this is?" Cuz the only people I know that have forearm tattoos are bikers. And I'm like, "Well, that's probably because you hang around the bikers." So, you know, but it is. I love the thought. Actually, I really don't want tattooing to become just this
This AI robot.
clinical
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Yeah, you know, I like going and kind of seeing like this rough looking dude who's gonna like tattoo a fairy on my arm. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's
Mhm.
what you're doing. Okay, I know what you're doing in 3 hours, but right now you're tattooing a fairy, relaxing into the pain. You know, Victor, I
Mhm.
fell asleep through some of my tattoos. The one on my back, I did that. My artist is like, are you
You still
asleep?
with me over there?
I'm like, I am. Just keep going. Just keep going.
Yeah, and I think Ben makes an interesting point too about the prog music because of its difficulty, but knowing a machine is generating it can be disappointing a little. And again,
Yeah.
every comment that people are adding here, it's really sort of coming down
Yeah.
to that, what is humanity? Am I okay listening to something
Mhm.
that was created by a machine? How important
Mhm.
is it to me that there was a human soul on the other end of that? And
Right.
and again, it's not like there is one right or wrong answer here, and for each one of us, it may even be different, but it the Pluto going through Aquarius is we all are gonna grapple with this, and we all are
Yeah.
gonna, maybe face some crises where we realize that this artist we've been listening to on Spotify, and it's been deeply meaningful for us, maybe it's just AI generated. And we're like, oh,
Right.
what does that mean that I can be moved and, inspired by
Mhm.
a computer program? So,
Right. Right.
again, there's no judgment on any of this, but just an
Oh yeah.
awareness that humanity is what we are grappling with. Um,
Right.
and for sure, all of us are we're gonna turn over some rocks in this process and not love what we see underneath. That is the energy of Pluto, wherever Pluto is going. With all of this as a backdrop, as the curtain behind everything else, um, in the first quarter of the year, both Neptune and Saturn, within a month or two of each other, moved from Pisces to Aries. And
Mhm.
they have a really interesting, these two planets have a really interesting relationship because Neptune is all about, the what we can dream, the cosmos, interconnectedness, um,
Yeah.
dreams, fantasies, mists. Like it doesn't want to nail anything down. It wants to just accept the expansiveness of the unknown.
Mhm.
Saturn absolutely wants to know. And not only does Saturn want to know, but Saturn wants a numbered list of how we know and what we know and what the next steps are now that we know. And so when Neptune and Saturn get together, in some ways it can be complementary because
Mhm.
um, Saturn will sort of force Neptune into some grounding and say, okay, 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 yes, you want to be the top influencer in the world. How exactly do you think we get there? What are the next steps?
Right.
So,
Right. Right.
and likewise, Saturn can be very disciplined and draconian and uninspiring and just kind of a drag. And Neptune can kind of bring Saturn's energy up a little bit and,
Mhm.
say, okay, sure, we can live every day exactly the same and follow our routine and stick to our plan, but where is the fun and joy in that? So,
Yeah.
together they can be very complementary, but
Mhm.
they do butt heads because
Yeah.
both of them want their way. And
Mhm.
when they are together, neither one can fully have their way. Now, when they
Right.
were both together at the end of Pisces, Neptune really has an edge in Pisces because
Mhm.
Pisces is pretty cosmic, pretty universal oneness, pretty opposed to nailing things down. So Neptune had an edge. As they
Mhm.
both moved into Saturn or into Aries, neither one of them has a great edge.
Right.
Neptune and um, Aries is very concrete. Aries is like, that is the hill we are taking. These are the
Right.
10,000 soldiers we're going to use to take the hill. And Neptune is like, why do we need a number? Why that hill when all hills are the same? And so Neptune in Aries is a little, not able to just do its thing. And then Saturn in Aries, Saturn is exalted in Libra, which is opposite to Aries. So Saturn is deemed as in its fall in Aries. And again, Aries is like initiatory. It wants to get things going. It wants to, it's like that Nike slogan, just do it. And Saturn is like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I don't want to do anything without a plan and without having evaluated pros and cons and knowing what the results might be. So neither one is really resonant with Aries. And then both of them together, it's almost like they are both fighting the Aries energy and they're fighting each other's energy. So this really is like Saturn has a plan and Neptune has thrown mist around the plan. But Aries knows knows the goal and where you want to go. But it's almost like this triangle of there is a goal, there are steps to get to the goal. Everything around the steps is shrouded in mystery. So it can just have this feeling of like you are walking forward, but it's so foggy. Are you going to sink in quicksand? Have you actually just been going in a circle this whole time because you can't see clearly? So the thing that feels most forward now that we are a couple of months into this Saturn and Neptune and Aries energy is the archetype, and I think we talked about this when we were talking about the year ahead, Christy, in December, is kind of the righteous warrior, like the person who is going to battle, Aries style, believing that their fantasy, their vision, their ideology is what the world needs. And Saturn is like, well, if this is the direction you're going to go, I'll make you a bulleted list on how to get there.
Right.
And I think so much of what we have been seeing in 2025 has really been this. It has been a variety of people, and you can look worldwide, you absolutely can. But even if we just look at this country, whether you look at the ideology of the political left or the right, or any particular religion that we have a presence for in the United States, everybody's kind of on their warpath. You know, they're kind of like, you know what, everybody, I got what you need. I am the righteous warrior who's showing up to get you where you need to go. You're welcome. And, you know, this is that interesting energy where just because each of us views ourselves as a righteous warrior doesn't necessarily mean we are. And we may even know what's best for us. That doesn't mean we know what's best for everybody. But right now in the Neptunian fog, everybody thinks they are right. And they are the righteous warrior who is moving forward with exactly what the world needs. So it really is, and this is all within the backdrop of grappling with our humanity. So even, you know, like if we, you know, don't want to go down anything too specific, but even if we just look at wars in general, we know there are multiple of those right now. There's a lot of conflict in Gaza. There's a lot still going on with Russia, Ukraine. Even if we just look at, and there are even protests all around the world, you know, again, groups of people who are like, I got what you need. I'm here to make sure you get what you need. This is all sort of like, have we lost the thread of humanity? You know, as everybody is entering their Saturn, Neptune, I am the righteous warrior the world needs right now. Have we forgotten what we're fighting for? You know, are we seeing humanity in the people around us? Are we actually still fighting for humanity, or are we fighting to be right?
Well, and isn't Saturn the traditional ruler of Aquarius? Did I get that right? Is that wrong?
You absolutely did.
Even that energy is still there. So there's a lot of Aquarian energy kind of coming in, but the shadow side of Aquarius is that person that will literally like just off with their heads and ask questions later. Like its shadow side is very dark. And I know, because like there are times that I embody that shadow side of the Queen of Swords, where I'm like, the uh like that Marie Antoinette kind of like let them eat cake, like
Mm-hmm.
like thing. And so it is, and I think the shadow side of the righteous warrior is a very dark one, because you really will drag people kicking and screaming um along with you, because you are so convinced that you're right. Like no one can convince you that you're not. And so it's, and because of the swords and the Aquarius, like it really is intellectual, like you've convinced yourself. And
Yeah.
I'm saying this from experience, like I have
Mm-hmm.
convinced myself before that I was completely unequivocally right, and I did not want to listen to anything else. And then by the time I actually calmed down and sat down and listened to it, I was like, oh yeah, I that wasn't
Well, and
that
that's
wasn't
such
right.
an important point, because this isn't just about looking at, bigger groups or communities or other people. None of us are immune from this energy. The energy
Yeah,
right now encourages all of us to be right and to know we're
yeah,
right and to make sure other people know we're right. And you know, there is a beautiful place for the righteous warrior, defending others. One thing you were talking about in your live yesterday, Christy, was kind of the divine masculine and sort of that
yeah.
protector role.
Hmm.
This can be a beautiful role. This is a needed
Yeah,
role,
yeah,
but you can pretty quickly get to the point of like, like the witch burnings and things like that, where you're like, well, this is
yeah.
for your own good, because
Right,
you're clearly wrong. Um,
right.
and so it's a very tricky balance. How do you maintain the depth of conviction needed when you are like a warrior, you are on the battlefield, you are
Yeah,
facing death metaphorically daily,
right,
um,
right.
and keep that sense of, I know why I'm here, I know what I'm doing this for, but at the
Yeah,
same time entertain the idea you might be wrong. You shouldn't be so sure that you're enforcing your will on a bunch of people who might not want it. It's just it's a very difficult balance. And
right, right.
you absolutely mentioned that Saturn is the traditional ruler of Aquarius. So Saturn is sort of ruling this Pluto in Aquarius right now. And then
Hmm.
also, Pluto in Aquarius, early degrees of Aquarius, is sextiling Neptune and Saturn in the early degrees of Aries. So they're also very familiar with each other and working with each other, which
Right.
um, some astrologers have called out that because we have all of these outer planets sextiling and trining each other, which are very harmonious aspects, that is nicer. And I think,
Mm,
yes, nicer in the sense that they're all working together and we are all sort of committed to a path as a result. But that
mhm.
may or may not be the right path. If we had a nice
Yeah,
square in there or an opposition, there might be someone to say to us, hey, is this really what you want to be doing right now? Are you really sure about this? Because this has some longer term effects. But there's kind of
right.
nobody to say that. All of the outer planets are like, yeah, we're on this. We've all got each other's backs. We're all moving forward towards a cause. And yeah, we don't really have anything to say, excuse me, are we sure we want to
Right,
do this?
right,
So
right.
that's sort of the second part of this backdrop, is kind of that Neptune and Saturn in Pisces moving into Aries and what that shift is looking like. And then just as a reminder, our Pluto, 20 years, Neptune will be in Aries. It will retrograde briefly back into Pisces this fall, but then it will be in Aries for 14 years, Saturn in Aries for about 2.5 years. I think they get their exact conjunction together. They have been dancing close together, but because of retrogrades, haven't fully conjoined. I think it's March 2026. They will exactly conjoin. That's going to be an interesting
Oh,
time period. Um, but yeah, we can see how these are different lengths of time. So
hmm,
some of this righteous warrior energy It's going to look different in 2.5 years when Saturn moves out, because Saturn isn't there to direct the righteous warrior anymore. Now the righteous warrior will just be taking a sword and swinging into the mist and hoping for the
Right.
best, hoping they hit an enemy instead of a friend, hoping they even know who is the enemy versus a friend.
Right. Oh man.
It's
It's a
big
lot.
energy. Yeah, it's a lot.
It
It's a lot. But,
it
just a
is.
reminder to, sorry, go ahead, Christy.
Oh no, I was gonna say I like I mean, okay, so I don't like war, but I like that kind of righteous warrior, energy. And again, as an Aquarius, uh, relationships with Aries can be tricky. It can have its moments where it's really good, and it can have its moments also where it just doesn't it just doesn't vibe. And so, there's a lot of, I think, just a lot of really paying attention, and like you said, there's no one there on the bigger proverbial stage to be like, I mean, did you
Excuse
guys
me.
do your
Yeah.
history? Do you really know what this is, or what it's not, or what it could be? Talking about anything like planting a tree. If I plant it next to my sewer system, are those tree roots eventually going to get in there and back up my sewer and cause $30,000 worth of damage? Probably, but if there's not anybody there in that moment to tell me, hey, that big oak tree would probably be better over there, you're like
Mhm.
you said, that can be a pretty big expense down the road, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And then we, in the scope of all of this, which, Pluto and Aquarius is enough, Neptune and Saturn moving into Aries is enough. But several days ago, the last outer planet made its move. Uranus moved into Gemini.
Yeah.
And this, astrologers have been talking about for the last several years, because
Hmm.
particularly in the US, Uranus in Gemini has a kind of storied history. Uranus was in Gemini during the Revolutionary War in the US. It was also in Gemini during the Civil War, and it marked pretty closely the US's involvement in World War II after Pearl Harbor. So those are the three times since the United States formed that Uranus has been in Gemini. Definitely big points in our history.
Hmm.
So lots of astrologers, including myself, have been saying this really is lining up for conflict. When you look at everything we've already talked about, with
Yeah.
the other outer planets, and then also Uranus moving into Gemini, this certainly does not seem like happy, peaceful, cow lying in a field kind of times. This
Right.
definitely has more of the, no, people are out there as righteous warriors. Uranus is coming in to disrupt, change everything. Oftentimes, conflicts, whether they become full scale wars or not, are disruptors. They kind of end certain structures of society and make way for others to be created. Um, and you and I also, we talked about this, Christy, in December,
Hmm.
we talked about this. So it's not like what we're seeing is a surprise. We're
Yeah.
still kind of seeing tensions with Russia. The Russia-Ukraine stuff continues. Um,
Mhm.
Very close to Uranus's entrance into Gemini, the U.S. bombed the nuclear sites in Iran. There
Mhm.
may be ripple effects of that we don't even know yet. Um,
Right.
Certainly, the Gaza stuff has continued, and there is honestly a lot of conflict just within the U.S.
Yeah.
It's been a long time since the two political sides have sort of demonized each other this much and not been able to have
Mhm.
a conversation, because each side is just almost like, I hate you, you're completely different
Right.
than me. You're a monster. I have no idea how you could believe this. And so, you know, there are lots of opportunities for conflict, and we've already been seeing some of those play out. Um,
Yeah.
I think there is And one thing I've heard a lot of astrologers talk about, because Gemini is an air sign, is that Uranus moving into Gemini is going to expedite AI even faster. Maybe.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
maybe. I'm more skeptical of that because I don't really see Gemini. Aquarius is much more the technology sign.
Hmm.
Gemini is
Hmm.
curious but non-committal, so I don't know. I honestly don't feel like much of that will stick. And if we look at AI's history over the last several years, it's corresponded to Pluto and Aquarius. It has been Gemini, or it has been Uranus independent. What I do think Uranus moving into Gemini will look like is more focus on a disruption of our beliefs and opinions, um,
Oh,
in a way that feels very stabilizing to each of us, very destabilizing to each of us as individuals, but also in
hmm,
communities and societies. Um, and Uranus wants to disrupt. The
yeah.
harder we try to keep Uranus down, the bigger
Hmm.
the explosion is when it comes. So I would
Hmm.
encourage everyone, work with Uranus. If you have these inklings in the back of your head that some people you disagree with may have a couple of points, they may not
Hmm.
be all wrong, do not shut that down. Let that
Right,
come to the surface. Consider that. Um,
right.
if we are willing to go along with Uranus and allow our thoughts, some of our beliefs to be disrupted, that's the easiest way it can go, because Uranus will
Yeah,
drag kicking and screaming if we don't go willingly.
right, right,
Uranus is definitely going to disrupt. But if we're willing to sort
right.
of go along and, okay, there are a lot of currents and a lot of rapids, but I'm just
Hmm.
kind of living in the moment, going with the flow. That is the way this energy is going to feel the easiest.
Hmm.
But this is a time when all of us are more ripe for changing our minds. And
Yeah.
I think this is where it does help some of that Aries energy that we've got with
Mhm.
Neptune and Saturn, because they are not willing to change their mind. They are not
Right,
curious. They are single focused, warrior in a battlefield, carrying a sword, trying to take the hill. They are
right,
not stopping halfway up the hill to say, is this the right hill? No.
right, right,
But Uranus
right.
and Gemini could help with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, is this really the hill I want to be taking? Is this the battle I want to be fighting? Um,
Mhm.
so lean in. I feel like even though Uranus and Gemini is very disruptive, it is very young, outward focused.
Mhm.
Um, it does have that balancing quality to some
Right.
of the Aries stuff, because we will consider other things. And if we're open to doing this
Mhm.
willingly, we could change our minds and become a better person, help our
Yeah.
communities, our families as a result. But Uranus and Gemini is also, with Uranus and Taurus, and I thought this was so interesting. Like, we saw quite a few um, physical, like, physical, what's the word I'm looking for? Natural, that's what I'm looking for.
Right.
Natural disasters as
Yeah.
Uranus was doing its final Taurus thing and moving into Gemini. Mount Rainier out here in Washington, there were a bunch of small earthquakes around it. And
Yeah.
geologists were kind of
Yeah.
like, what was that? Um,
Right.
there were the flash floods in Texas where tragically people lost their lives. And it almost felt like Uranus and Taurus, there was a lot of natural disasters. All of the wildfire stuff pretty closely corresponded to Uranus Mars placements, but Uranus and Taurus is disruption of the natural world. We're sort of
Mhm.
moving out of that phase and into disruption of the mind, the thought space, the air.
Yeah.
Um,
I
yeah, please.
Victor brought up a good point here that I wanted to address. He said, "I don't see a global war happening again unless a false flag ET threat. People are waking up. Hard to sell a war when people are awake." And I think with Gemini, with it being an air sign, it's going to be more intellectual
Mhm,
arguing and
mhm, mhm,
fighting, and it's going to be a conflict of ideas. So it might not manifest itself the way it has in previous years,
mhm.
where it's like
Absolutely.
full blown war. But, even these, uh, I mean, look at like even just the situation around Gaza. That's been going on for a long
Mhm,
time, but there's
mhm,
so much passion between the Israelis and the Palestinians, and then you've got Russia, Ukraine, and even
mhm,
what's going on here. It's ideological, and
mhm,
I
mhm,
would agree. I don't think anybody really wants to bomb any place, or
mhm.
have something like that happen, or send our children off. I do think that there would be a huge uprising about that. But I think what almost, to me, it seems, now this is just my personal opinion for whatever it's worth, um into or oh, the word is right there.
Ideological?
Intellectual stuff
Mhm,
is harder to fight sometimes, because like you said, when you're ground in, and you're really dug in, and there's this mist around it, it's not as easy to fight that fight as it is to say, like, here's our battle plan, here's the map, here's the hill, this is what we're going to do. So,
mhm.
um, it can definitely, I think, be a lot more tricky. I mean, I
Yeah.
feel like, is that accurate?
Yeah, well, and of course, none of us knows exactly what this is going to look like.
Sure.
I think it is
Right.
important, even though there's such a focus on Uranus and Gemini, Revolutionary War, Civil War, US involvement in
Right.
World
Right.
War II. That's true. But
Yeah.
all of those started as very specific ideologies. Like the
Mm,
Revolutionary War was this
right.
ideological war that we were paying Britain too much in taxes, right? And they didn't deserve
Right.
it. And we had, whatever resources here, and we deserved it. And there
Right.
was the
Right.
whole taxation without representation. But
Yeah.
the war didn't start with two people just throwing rocks at each other. It
Right.
started because of an ideology. And same with the
Right.
Civil War. There was so much going on.
Yeah.
The Civil War ended slavery.
Hmm.
Like there were big ideological things. Again, it wasn't
Right.
just like, you know, uh, people in the heat of the moment made
Hmm.
a decision to go to war. It was very ideologically based. And same with the US
Right.
involvement in World War II. The US did not want to go to war. We had come out of World
Yeah.
War One. Everybody was like,
Right.
no more of that, please. But there was kind of
Right.
this thought that Hitler was not going to stop and was going to keep going and doing these blitzkriegs and taking over other countries. And
Right.
so that, the key underscore here is not specifically that Uranus in Gemini brings wars, but that Uranus in
Right.
Gemini brings ideological differences that people feel very strongly about. Does that mean that
Right.
it's always going to result in people picking up a sword or a stick? Not necessarily.
Right.
And
Right.
even if you
Right.
look at the Revolutionary War, Civil War, World War II, those were very different wars fought under very different circumstances.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what it could look like this time around. I mean, frankly, the trade wars, the tariffs and everything, that looks
Yeah.
very ideological. Like, well, what does the
Right.
US deserve versus other people?
Right.
And
Right.
that is already causing lots of interesting discussions and ripples down the line. um,
Mhm.
and I keep feeling like privacy, security, um, like like if there were any kind of big computer hack,
Uh-huh.
like
Oh.
someone, one country hacking into another country's banking
Mhm.
systems, or something like that, that could also feel very Uranus and Gemini, very airy, but
Right.
again, very ideologically based. Like, what does
Right.
my country have? What does another country have? What do we deserve?
Yeah.
So I think,
Mhm.
sort of the underscore here is less about actually picking up arms and formally declaring war, and much more about there are deep ideological differences that people want to take action
Right.
on. And Uranus, the disruptor, is like, I'm not putting up with this
Right.
ideological dystopia anymore. And
Right.
so that can result in something that looks remarkably like a war, that can result in other things. Again, I do think even all
Right.
of these trade discussions and tariffs back and forth, that is
Yeah.
a huge form of ideological conflict between
Hmm.
countries.
Well,
So
and
yeah,
even
I
as you
would
say that,
underscore that more than like war specifically.
right. And even as you say that, it's funny because you're talking about, and I'm imagining like these ships in the water and everything, and it feels very revolution, like
Yeah.
the uh, Boston Harbor Tea Party and all of that stuff. Like it was goods being brought over and ships
Hmm.
and that. It's all of that. It's so interesting how this all correlate, like how you look back at it and you're like, okay, at the core of it though, we're still all of these years later, ships in water bringing goods to us, and we're still like, no. Or oh, this person is bad, or this thing is bad, and we don't
Yeah.
want to get involved, but we do because we're whatever. It's very interesting to see it. I mean, I don't think any of us want it to
Yeah.
go that way, but when you look at it, it's very interesting because history does repeat itself. Like if we
Yeah.
don't learn from it, it does repeat, and we've seen that. And
Mhm.
so, you know, we
And
can
I think
apply
there's
our
some
knowledge.
yeah, and there's some interesting stuff called out in the comments too, like with Pakistan and
Yeah.
India. Absolutely.
Uh-huh.
Again, ideological differences, a lot of conflict, and the quantum hacking, and I have thought about this. I do feel like one way that Uranus and Gemini could support AI, because
Hmm.
Uranus and Pluto will be trining each other, which is a very supportive aspect. It could be advances in quantum computing to the point that AI requires less compute power and doesn't require all of these nuclear facilities. That could be something that gets explored slash, some big breakthroughs during Uranus and Gemini. Which again, that has huge ramifications. If we get
Yeah.
quantum computing, nothing is really safe. You can brute force, any passwords or, tokens or security stuff.
Right.
So that has a whole own set of problems. The other thing is that Gemini is very associated with travel.
Uh-huh.
Um, because it is ruled by Mercury, who is the fastest, most movable planet.
Hmm.
And I am really anticipating a lot of revolutions around the way we travel. I feel like
Oh,
we're already starting to see some of this. Tesla released their first self driving cars. Tesla's been talking about self driving cars for years and years and years, but they just
right.
released some in Austin. Waymo, which is Google owned, has multiple cities where there are actually driverless cars that will shuttle you around. Um, and so I
How do
expect to
you
see
feel
more
about that?
there. You're asking me personally?
Yeah, how do
Or
you feel about, or like, I mean, and everybody in the chat, like, how do you
yeah.
feel about driverless cars? It kind of freaks me out. I don't know that I want to get into a car where there's not an actual person who can slam on the brakes. Now that's my control issue. I would probably be like, nope. But I mean, how do you feel about that? Like, how do you guys feel about that? Like, what do you
Can't
think?
wait to see I can't wait to see the responses to this. And I think it's also interesting because so much of technology,
Uh-huh.
um as a collective, we resist it until it's inevitable. Like whole bunches of people did not want a TV in their house. They did not want electric lights. They were like, I don't want lightning moving around through. I will stick to my candles. Thank you very much. And yeah, people were afraid to ride in planes. They were afraid to ride in cars originally. They were like, it's
Right.
unnatural. Just give me a
Uh-huh.
horse. And it used to be you even kind of needed like a chauffeur to drive, because
Right.
driving,
Right.
you had to turn the crank. Like it wasn't something that easily everybody could do without training. And
Right.
so
Right.
I think it's um now, does that mean all of the technology that has been developed, smartphones, the internet, everything has been great? No, 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 no. Some of it has been
Right.
great, some of it has been not great, most of it has been a mixed bag. It's as good as we
Mhm.
make it and what we use it for. But I am
Right.
expecting a lot of innovation around transportation and movement. Even things like I know Amazon for years has had an initiative where they're trying to deliver packages to people via little drone robots that like carry them through the air and drop them on your front porch. Um, they have
Really?
been
Oh
blocked
my
at many
God.
turns. Yeah, yeah, that's been a
Right.
project of theirs. But
That's
Uranus and Gemini would be the time when I would expect to see some of that get figured out.
okay.
If we were to look all the way into science fiction, this would be the
Uh-huh.
time when we could get teleportation, which is
Right.
that would be such a revolution in travel
No,
if we got
I tell you,
teleportation.
with as much as I travel, sometimes there are times when we've got those long ass trips where I'm just like, it's going to take us 20 hours to get where we're going if we don't stop. I would love to
Yeah.
just be teleported. Like, I could come
Mhm.
spend an afternoon. We could walk around Seattle and drink
I
coffee, and
know.
I could pick how many times to make dinner. I am totally for that. Isn't that hilarious? I would do that, like rearrange my molecules to put me in Washington State. I'm good, but don't give me a driverless car. Like, I don't know about that.
That is interesting, Christy, as you're saying that, because I do feel like one of those should require more trust than the other, but you know.
Yeah, go ahead, rearrange me. Can you make me taller when I get to the other side? That
So
would be cool. I'd be
anyway,
like,
again, I'm
coffee.
not saying I'm not
Right,
predicting we will have teleportation in the next 7
right,
years, but
right.
looking at Uranus, the disruptor in the fields of like transportation and moving things, um, yeah, teleportation is something I would think about.
Right,
And it
right,
wouldn't even have to start with humans. It could even just be like it starts with shipping stuff. So you order
right.
something from Sephora and it
Uh-huh.
doesn't come through the mail on a plane. It comes like via teleportation. Again, I
Right.
don't know what this looks like. Caveat,
For that.
caveat. I am not a physicist. But yeah, this is the sort of um, forward progress I
Uh-huh.
would expect with Uranus and Gemini.
Right, right.
Um, and it is so airy. Again, Gemini is an
Yeah,
airy sign, so we're kind of inundated with air and fire right now. Two of the outer
right,
planets
right.
in air, two of them in fire. Um, Fire and air together is pretty explosive without some water
Mhm.
or earth to put it out.
Yeah,
So some of this maybe we go quite a ways and then we're like, did we do the right thing? Maybe we went a little bit too far. Did we just create a giant fire that we can't really control anymore? I'm
right,
sure there will be some
right.
element of that because we don't have any balancing forces in earth or water. And I even feel like I've seen articles where people are already saying that about AI. Like, oh, have we gone too far? Maybe we need to backtrack this and try to regulate it. But at this point, the cat
Right,
is kind of out of the bag. So
right.
yeah, I think for sure, Uranus in Gemini, lots of potential for technological innovations since it is an air sign. I would be looking mostly at AI, maybe sort of peripherally. That's mostly a Pluto and Aquarius story, but for sure, transportation stuff. And the other thing Gemini really rules is communication. Um,
Mm,
so I think that is going to be pretty interesting. I
yeah.
know I told you about this, Christy, but I listened to a podcast, a really popular podcast several months ago called the Telepathy Tapes. And
Yes.
if telepathy was going to become a more known, understood thing, I think
Mhm.
Uranus and Gemini, like thoughts and communication that travels through the air, this would be the time
Right.
that we would kind of figure that out. Um, and then, I think like there's also an element of, what is communication? And, the air signs, it could be a little more ephemeral. Like for
Right.
example, even if we say that telepathy works and you can train people to do it, let's say that's true. Um, what comes through? Is it actually sentences that you would read like you would read a text, or is it feelings? Is it images? Does it depend on the person? So I think there are also going to be some disruptions around like what is communication. There's body language, there's the actual words spoken, there's intonation, there's imagery. So I feel like a lot of that, there's going to be some shifts. And then even if we look at things like, the fact that we are talking to each other, all of us, even though
Right.
we are all around the
Right.
country,
Yeah.
via, essentially, well, Restream, YouTube, Zoom, that is a pretty big shift in communication. I don't know how many other people noticed this after the pandemic started, but when I started doing a lot of my meetings and readings online,
Mhm.
you realize that there are whole pieces of body language and energy vibe that are harder to
Mhm.
get, and you almost have to train yourself to get them in a new way
Right.
online.
Yep.
And so I think there are going to be elements of that too, where we're sort of uncovering more about communication and what all goes into it besides just this sentence and then the next sentence.
Right.
And then I
Right.
think that will be connected in some way with that trine to Pluto and Aquarius to the AI story. Certainly the AI story can spit out a bunch of text, totally, totally.
Right.
And it can spit out images and it
Mhm.
can spit out songs and, but it's sort of like, okay, like you, Christy, were saying you and Ben, like generated a song with AI and you were like,
Yeah.
it sounds not quite human enough.
Right.
And it's like, what is
Right.
that? And
Yeah.
it's almost like,
Yeah.
what is missing? What does the AI
Right.
not have that our brain is keying off of? So I think all of this, there will be an element in which Uranus and Gemini plays into that bigger Pluto and Aquarius story, even though I don't think it
Interesting.
specifically is about AI.
Right. Right. That's
Okay,
interesting.
the last thing I want to say about Uranus in Gemini, if we look at Uranus and Taurus, Taurus is
Mhm.
kind of the big, solid bull in the field, kind of hard to get him going. Uranus, like Taurus doesn't really want to move, doesn't really want to
Mhm.
disrupt. Um,
Mhm.
which, in a way that makes some of the Uranus and Taurus things harder. For sure,
Mhm.
I had my own share of struggles with that as a Taurus sun, with Uranus going over my sun. And
Mhm.
I was like, I don't want to
Right.
change. You can, yeah, I won't. And then, of course, it drags
Right.
you along anyway. But so in a way it's difficult, but in a way, again, there's kind of that balancing force of Taurus doesn't want to change. Uranus wants to super change. And you kind of
Right.
probably meet somewhere in the middle. Um, Gemini is super changeable.
Yeah.
And so, I feel like Uranus and Taurus would be more prone towards depression, feeling
Mhm.
stuck, stagnant, like
Mhm.
itching for that Uranian freedom, but feeling like you're
Right.
stuck.
Right.
But Uranus and Gemini is much more like anxiety. Like the brain kind of
Interesting.
going too fast,
Yep.
too much, too many things to
Mhm.
process. And so
Mhm.
have talked to a bunch of people in the last few days who have already kind of felt that. They're like, why am I more jittery than usual? Why is my
Yeah.
brain just everywhere? Why can I not
Right.
process anything? Because it's just too much. So,
Right.
we will all adapt to Uranus and Gemini. This is not going to be what the whole thing feels like. All of these planets come in with a
Right.
bang. But just being aware that if there were areas where you felt a little more depressive during the
Mhm.
last 7 years, those may be areas where it's almost like you go to the other end of the scale and it's a little more anxiety inducing. And so for all of us, if
Wow.
you don't already have journaling practices, meditation practices, things to kind of bring you down, ground you, Uranus
Mhm.
and Taurus was connected with the ground. And
Right.
Uranus and Gemini is not connected to the ground.
Yeah.
So we'll all need to be more conscious about grounding.
Right. And it's really easy for those air signs to just kind of float away. Just kind of,
Yes.
I mean, I've noticed that in myself. Even when I'm in a place, when I was in Alaska, when I lived there, I was, I mean, it took a lot to pull me back down. So anxiety, that would that would look very different, you know.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's interesting. That's
But
interesting.
then I
Yeah.
do feel like the other side of that is, Uranus and Gemini, it's interested, it's
Yeah.
curious. It's,
Mhm.
any areas where we have been feeling stuck, we are not going to feel stuck
Mhm.
anymore. Um,
Right.
we may be moving at a faster pace than we'd like, and it may feel a little bit too
Huh?
much like a roller coaster, but at least now we're on the roller coaster rather than the last several years felt more like you're waiting in line for the roller coaster. And the
Mhm.
line is so long and it just keeps slowly inching forward. And you're like, whatever the roller coaster is like, at this point, I just want to get on. And so,
Right, right, right.
now at least we are on the roller coaster. We are not stuck.
Right,
We are not bored.
right,
We are not impatient. Now it's almost like, okay, now the ride is moving and we're
right,
moving probably faster than we're ready to. Um,
right, right.
but we're like, this is such an opportunity, I think, for all of us, especially more spiritual seekers. The
Mhm.
energy for changing and moving and just sometimes inertia is so hard to overcome, and that is
Right,
not true this year. This year,
right.
whether it's a habit you are trying to break, like if you are, I don't know, like a smoker, or you want to exercise more, or you want to, like, whatever it is, you want to meditate every morning and you have not been able to get into a habit. You watch,
Mhm.
you doom scroll for a couple hours before bed and you don't want to do that anymore. The energy
Right.
to break those habits and change them into something better, more intentional, it's so strong right now. It's so
Right.
strong. So yeah, this is a lot of energy, a lot of heady,
Mhm.
airy energy. It can
Right.
manifest as anxious energy, but
Mhm.
there is a huge upside that, like, yeah,
Right.
we can get out of our rut. We can make our life into what we wanted. And for those people who have been journaling, especially during the first part of the year with the Mars
Mhm.
retrograde, which was so prolonged and
Mhm. Yeah.
painful, um, look back at those entries where you were like, this is what I want to change. This is what I want to change. Like, there was such a reflective period when Mars and Mercury and Venus were all retrograde in that early part of the year.
Mhm.
If we've done the work to identify what we want to change, the energy to change our life right now is so strong.
Right. Oh, that's amazing. So I love that. So then almost like a good time to set those intentions into motion and to really just like, what does this look like? Like, it might not happen today, but that's something Michael and I are looking at. We're like, okay, we know we want to be in Washington. What does that
Yeah.
look like for us? What do we have
Yes.
to do to get there?
Yes.
And I was telling Karina, I'm like, before, I was like, just go. No, we're not going to do that. But that's why journaling is so important, because I don't remember what I wrote in my journals a few months ago, or sometimes even a few weeks ago. But to be able to go back and look at it and be like, okay, what was I thinking? Is that really the direction that I want to go in? That's powerful.
Hmm. Yeah. It's super powerful. And I just feel like there are, relatively speaking, so few times when the astrology is so favorable to just
Yeah.
making big changes. And I've talked to a couple of people who, there were habits they were trying to break. And they said, yeah, I just noticed over the last few days, I don't really need that thing anymore.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, like on a subconscious level, they're stepping into being a new person who
Right.
doesn't
Right.
necessarily, yeah, need all of the old habits. So I think, yeah, it's challenging, right? Like, as humans,
Mhm.
change, even really good change, really beneficial change, it's
Yeah.
hard. And
Yeah.
so I think, I feel like I just sort of have been getting this imagery through all of 2025, that for those of us who are trying to show up for our life and
Yeah.
do better and be better. And it's just there, we're kind of just going uphill. And
Mhm.
the good news is we can go up the hill. For several years, we were so stuck we
Right.
couldn't even go up the hill. Now we can go up the hill, but it's still just a lot
Right.
of work. And we're like, when is the top? Are we at the top yet? Like that classic, mom and dad, are we there yet?
Yes.
It's,
Yes.
yeah, so it's hard. It's hard, but the
Right.
opportunities are so strong. I think this is really going to be a year, all of us collectively are going to look back on as such a pivotal point, not just in global or national society or policies,
Mhm.
but on our own individual level, as a time when we
Mhm.
really made some hard turns, to
Right.
do something different.
Right. I love that. And, and this is where, my writing comes out, but even just putting that down for future generations, because a lot of what I'm dealing with
Yeah,
right now is generational stuff. So, I mean, I'm not going to be here, when my great, great, great grandkids are here. Like that
yeah,
realistically, I'm not going to be here. But if I can write this down and share it, um, that's amazing, especially with, and a lot of times I think we look at life. I mean, I know I do. I look back and I think, oh, what were the big things that were happening, and you think of like MTV first came on the air and you landed on the moon, or the first cell phones, or, whatever it is. But this feels very important too. I mean, not just
mm,
the AI thing, but personally for us, for our families, for the things that we're doing in life, this,
yeah,
maybe all of this bigger stuff. I mean, yes, of course it's going to affect us, but maybe this looks different for you as a person healing yourself in this different way. Like, this is a time to do that,
yeah.
and move forward, as icky and as it
Difficult
is.
as that. Yes, yes.
Yeah. Oh man. Wow. That was amazing.
We're just entering such a time, such a time. And if
Yes.
anybody has questions about anything we talked about, please feel free to drop
Yeah.
them in the chat, because I do feel like,
Like,
yeah, we dumped a lot of stuff from 4 different planets and lots of changing energies. Um, but yeah, I am excited for this time, even though I know not
mhm.
everything is going to be, better or
Right.
perfect. I think
Right.
the beauty, if you think that astrology does anything or
Hmm.
means anything, there's such a cyclical nature to it. And
Yeah.
each zodiac sign has corrective properties from the
Mhm.
sign that came before. So there is
Right.
this almost like cosmic sense that we're being kept in check from going too
Mhm.
far in any direction. Eventually, the energy changes, the energy shifts. And we had been
Right.
in a very internally focused period for quite a number of
Mhm.
years, when all the outer planets
Right.
were in more yin, reflective inward signs. And that's
Right.
amazing, beautiful energy. But at some point, we
Oh,
got to take that
absolutely.
out to the world, and we got to do
Right.
something with that. Except, if there's a few people who want to just sit on top of a mountain, like a Buddhist monk or something, there are
Right.
those people. But for most of
Yeah.
us, we do that internal reflection work so we can then show up better in the world, in our communities, in our families.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That was this is just, I love conversations like this,
Mhm.
where it's a lot of different things and different ideas, and and no one's wrong, because we don't know what it looks like.
Right.
We have no idea, and but we can imagine, and we can put a big, and you guys know I'm so big on intention. We can put a big intention behind um some of this moving in a direction. And I think that's beautiful. I don't see any questions. Oh,
I
Ben says, okay, I think Karina was the kid that stayed awake in class and shot the curve for those of us who weren't so enthusiastic in school.
I definitely was very attentive in school.
Right.
In retrospect, more attentive than I probably should have been. I could have had more fun than I did.
See, I
I
was the
bet Ben
kid
had more fun.
I was the kid in school that this, no joke, this went through my head. So we used to get those phone calls, like our parents would get phone calls when we ditched class. That's how it was when I was a kid. And if you were smart enough to figure out when the calls came, you could answer the phone and like pretend
Intercept.
you were talking to a friend. And so for me, the calls was like, your Pooter High School student has missed one or more classes today. If this is an excused absence, please contact the office. Otherwise, this will count against them as an unexcused absence. How many times do you think I intercepted that call? It's like I graduated in 95. So my thought was, well, I'm already getting one call today. So what the hell? We're just going to go do whatever. I only showed up for like English class. I showed up for, anatomy and physiology. I don't know why I showed up for that one, but I showed up for A and P.
Interesting.
And like science classes, like history classes, I showed up for this. Everything else, I was just like, loading my friends up in my car and we were gone. And so I was not that person, except maybe in English class, I threw the curve off, but for all intents and purposes, that was not me. I mean, it's like, oh, you're actually here today. Be like, well, for this period anyway.
Well, it's important that we all bring our different energies. And as we've been talking about, we even have the chance to shift some of our energies
Yeah.
over this next year. So if there are
Yeah.
any areas we've journaled or reflected on, things we want to change, this is the time. This is the time. You are not going to find a better time in the next decade. Anybody
Right.
listening, if you want to make a change.
I love that. Well, I think that's a good note to end on. It is a great day to make a change. And as we like to say here, go conquer your world as only you can. We'll be here to help you light the way. Guys, thank you so much for being here. This was such a fun conversation. I loved it. Ben said he made honor roll once, but I assure you
I'm
it wasn't
sure he did.
intentional.
Yeah.
Well, I'm
Ben
pretty
is
sure.
very intelligent.
He is a very smart guy. All right, you guys. Well, take care. I will not be seeing you tomorrow because I'm off on Thursdays, and I may see you on Friday. I may not. I'm not sure, but we'll see you again real soon. Take care of yourselves.
Where